All right. This is the special board meeting and committee of the whole for District 96. This is Wednesday, April 6th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsadi? Present. Ms. Gunn?
Here.
Ms. Kleiber?
Here.
Mr. Marhol?
Here.
Mr. Muirhead?
Here.
Ms. Murphy? Here. And Mr. Hunt?
Here.
A quorum is present.
All right. First item on our agenda this evening is welcome to Hollywood School from Principal Kim Hefner.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hollywood School. This is an evening of firsts. It's the first time in a long time that you've been at a building other than Ames or Hauser, and I am honored that you chose Hollywood to come for your committee of the whole. This is the first, hopefully, of many more board meetings and events that will be held in the multi-purpose room here at Hollywood School. As you can see, it's a beautiful space. Lots of windows, very well designed. We are currently using it for orchestra, music, to meet as large groups. Sometimes we have IEP meetings in here, but it's used for a variety of things every single day. And in the next 2 weeks, we are intending, as we go smaller and smaller, closer and closer, we will have lunch here. We are really looking forward to that. I have given each board member a pin. It's by your place, and it says remarkable. This is Hollywood's theme for the year. Every year we have a different theme, and we get a new pin each year. So I want you to know that I think your leadership and collaboration, along with the district leadership, in the way we handled the pandemic was absolutely remarkable. It wasn't easy. You had many very upset people to deal with, but you need to know that they were upset with the situation, and no matter what decisions were made, they were going to be upset because we were all upset. But you never steered from the best interest of our students and staff in the decisions that you made. And I am so grateful to work for a board that keeps the children as their focus and safety as their focus. Thank you. Today is a day at Hollywood. We took our first IAR test. And if you notice the decorations in the hallway, we are going with the remarkable theme, and we've decided that IAR at Hollywood stands for I Am Remarkable. And we know that that assessment, while it's loathed by many people, it is an opportunity for our Huskies to show their growth and that they truly are remarkable in everything they're learning. Every Husky who is taking the IAR today receives some Smarties and a little card that says, "You're a smarty pants." Tomorrow, they'll receive mints, and it will talk about their great achievements. Also, we've just finished up our One Book, One Hollywood read, The Wild Robot. It was, all the books were purchased by our PTA, but it was a school-wide program. I know some of you participated in reading for the podcast. Thank you. Really appreciate that. But it's just a great way to engage our entire community. And we did have a school-wide celebration here. So those are the things. We're emerging from this pandemic. Knock it on wood, because BA2 is out there, and there'll be another one. But things are happening, and it's very, very exciting. I also wanted to share that beginning this Friday, we have an artist in residency program. An organization called Cirque Esteem is coming to Hollywood 6 Fridays in a row. Every Husky will have an hour of training in circus arts. But what makes it even greater in this learning a new skill is the emphasis on growth mindset, because that's something that devolved during the pandemic. The ability to persevere try new things, and push and push and push, try again to be successful. And also, it's called CERC Esteem. It works on building their esteem through growth mindset. And then also, their core value is cheering for each other and supporting each other. And I'm so excited that the PTA supported our ability to bring that program to Hollywood. So you're all invited to our performance. There'll be a mini circus, hopefully outside, weather dependent, on May 20th. It's a Friday at 6 o'clock, but I'll send you an email also. So once again, thank you for your leadership and for coming over to Hollywood to hold your CAL meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Definitely good to be in a different environment. No offense to Ames, but definitely had a lot of great meetings there. We'll have a lot of more meetings there, but it's nice to be in a different location. All right. So our next item is public comment. Is there any public comment?
There is not.
All right. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? If not, that will take us to committee reports. First one listed is the Education Committee.
Yeah, we're just gonna pass it over to Angela to give a presentation. You don't want to hear what I have to say.
Okay, I just have a quick question, I'm sorry. So when this presentation is over, we're rolling into the second one, or am I doing all the other?
Let's roll into the second, the special ed one.
Okay. Just making sure. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you tonight. I am fortunate to work with our wonderful EL team here in District 96. And I am pleased to have part of the team join me tonight to tell you about our EL programming, which will include information about identification for our students in the EL program, as well as the types of supports that we offer our students in the EL program. So tonight we have with us Danae Rodea Preble, who teaches at Ames. We have Alejandra Govia Lopez, who teaches at Central. Molly Quiros, who teaches at Central and Hollywood. And Christina Castaneda, who teaches at Hauser Junior High. Part of our team also includes Minnie Maywood, who is at Ames with Danae, and Jenny Rehort, who is at Life Park, and then Mary Kate Myrna, who is at Hollywood with Molly. So unfortunately, they were not able to be with us tonight, but they are another part of this wonderful team. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our educators.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for inviting us and for your time. You can call me Alex. If you say Alejandra, no one's gonna probably be like, who? We don't have anyone with that name here. I will start off by defining what EL is, which is English Learners. There's been many acronyms for ELs, ESL, ELL, but currently we use the term EL, English Learners. The state PERSER requirements, if we have English learners in our buildings, we are to provide EL services. EL services per state is specialized instruction that is designed to support students who speak another language other than English, or whose parents speak another language other than English. So it doesn't necessarily always say as that the student can produce or actually speak the language. As long as they're exposed to another language, they are to receive a support. Now the support that we give concentrates or focuses on 4 domains, which is listening, speaking, reading, and writing in English. So we're looking at their English academic vocabulary and not so much the basics, but more like the academic terminology and the academic language that is used in schools. I will turn it over to Danae, who will talk about the identification process of how do we identify ELs.
The identification process starts with the home language survey. Families of students are required to fill out a home language survey in which they answer 2 questions. Is a language other than English spoken at home? And does the student speak a language other than English? If the answer is yes to either question, parents are asked to indicate the language on the form, and then the student is screened to measure their English language proficiency. The screener part. Kindergartners and first graders in their first trimester of school are administered the model or the measure of developing English language. Kindergartners only complete the listening and speaking domains of the screener to measure their oral language, while first graders complete all 4 domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing to measure their overall proficiency. First graders in the second trimester to 12th graders are administered all domains of the WIDA Access Placement Test, or also known as the WAPT. English proficiency scores on the screeners range from 1, entering stage of English language development, to the highest, a 6, reaching stage of English language development. In kindergarten, an oral language score below a 5 qualifies a student to receive instructional support. In 1st through 12th grade, an overall composite score below 5 and a literacy score below a 4.2 qualifies a student to receive instructional support. Students whose home language is Spanish and scored below a 3.5 are screened in Spanish to determine if their Spanish oral language skills are higher than their English oral language skills, in which case they would qualify for receiving native language instruction in Spanish. A placement program recommendation letter is sent home to parents within 30 days after the beginning of the school year, or 14 days after enrollment. Parents can accept or decline the program recommendation. Students entering the program receive language instruction for at least 3 years, not counting kindergarten, or until they reach the state exiting criteria of an overall 4.8 on the annual state assessment access. This test is given to English learners, including those who have declined instructional support. Students who exit the program are then monitored for 2 years to ensure they continue to be successful without specialized language instruction. And now Molly will talk to us about the different programs.
Okay, so we offer 3 different EL program modules in District 96. We have full-time transitional bilingual education, also known as TBE, part-time TBE, as well as the transitional program of instruction known as TPI. Students who are in our full-time TBE program are students whose parents have indicated Spanish on their home language survey, and they have qualified for EL services through the WIDA screener and access scores. They also have scored high enough on the Spanish screener to qualify for native language instruction. These students receive instruction in 4 language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing in both English and Spanish. Students who qualify for the part-time TBE program also have indicated Spanish on their home language survey and are identified as EL through the screener. However, they did not score high enough on the Spanish placement test to qualify for native language instruction. So their instruction is only given in English. Now, while they do not qualify for native language instruction, they are given native language support when needed. The last program that we have is the TPI program, and the TPI program is very similar to part-time TBE in that instruction is only given in English. These students have language other than English indicated on their home language survey. However, this language is not Spanish, unless they're at one of the smaller schools, but I'll also talk about that in a minute. So they do not receive native language support, native language instruction. However, students in the TPI program typically do not get any native language support either. Alex is going to talk now about how we determine which program models are offered at each of our buildings.
So you're probably wondering, like, how do we decide whether to offer a TB or TPI program? The state has the magic number of 20. So if there is in any building that we have more than 20 students that speak that language and qualify for EL services, we are to provide services in that native language. So that's how we determine whether we provide TBE services. Therefore, we also have to have a TPI program for those students that we don't have 20 or more that speak that language, but we still have to provide support. Now, the difference is that with TBE, we have to have a teacher that would be able to provide native language instruction if needed. even if they have the part-time. But TPI, we're not required to have a teacher that speaks that native language. So since we do have the majority of our students here at the district are Spanish speakers, we do have, which in the next slide, we can see that we have 2 buildings that actually do qualify for TVE services currently, and that's Ames Elementary and Central Elementary. They both qualify because we have more than 20 Spanish speakers at each building, and we provide the services, and that's why we have teachers that are native in Spanish to be able to provide those services. We also have other students that don't speak Spanish or whose parents don't speak Spanish, so then that's when we offer the TPI services. TPI services are also provided at Ames and Central, but also well as Blythe, Hollywood, and Hauser Junior High. Now, I would like to just kind of indicate that Hauser, it is around 14 when it comes to our Spanish-speaking population. Every year, our Spanish-speaking population at Hauser is growing, and it's safe to say that in a couple of years or so, we're probably going to hit that 20 mark, making that the state will require us to also offer native language instruction support at the Hauser Junior High. So that's where we're at. And then next slide, how do we provide these services? So they look a little bit different, similar in all the buildings. We take in consideration like all the needs and the students that we have. Services are provided either through a push-in model, so a teacher goes into the classroom and provides services there for the students, or is it through a pull-out model where the teacher pulls out the students and they receive instruction in a small group setting. We definitely provide pull-out services through a pull-out model for TVE because it's Spanish instruction. So we work with the teachers to make sure that when instruction is given, if it is a pull-out, that it's done in a way that students are not missing any core instruction, and it is also that it works out for the schedule and they're not missing anything. So we do work with the teachers to do that, and we emphasize that to the parents because that is one of their biggest concerns. Our program here is a little bit very different from other districts like Cicero or Berwyn because we don't have such a huge population where we actually have self-contained rooms, but we still have to offer services, so they're done through the push-in or pull-out model. At Hauser, it is departmentalized where we have an actual block. So students that qualify for EL services, they have a block where they would go, and we have a block for 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders. It's during that encore time that they would receive their services. Now it gets a little tricky there because our EL students also qualify sometimes for reading intervention, math intervention, and it's very important to stress that EL services are not an intervention. They're actually considered a tier 1. It's part because a language barrier is not an academic they have academic deficits. It's just that language barrier. So we still have to provide support for them. And in Hauser, sometimes they have so many other supports that they're given that the EL teacher does have to push in one of their classes to be able to provide that support to students. We also have newcomers. In the last 5 years in our district, we've had at least one or more students that have come and they have no English. And they're usually at the junior high, making it very hard. It's a very stressful time. Students are very nervous when they come in because they're coming in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and not understanding a single word that people are saying. So we do have to provide more services. Usually when we have newcomers, we are to provide at least 300 minutes or more of support for them. So we have had newcomers. We are currently about to have another newcomer that she should be starting pretty soon. And we had 2 that were here and left. So they're also transient, but we do have, and every year we've had more and more newcomers. Then that brings me to our outplay students. So we also have students that qualify that are getting services outside the school district, but because they do, their home school is still, the district is still their serving district, we are still to provide services, which gets very tricky because then that requires one of us to have to travel to those buildings to provide support. Currently, we do have quite a few that do need those services, and we're trying to work on how to make that possible, because it does. There's it makes it
Eligibility
hard.
outplaced because of special education needs,
Special
right?
education. Yes, but we still have to, and we do go in, we have to administer the access assessment every January. And when we get the home language survey, it comes to us, and then it's our responsibility as a district to go out to them and screen them to see whether they qualify for services and offer that to the parents. And that brings us to Christina, who will be talking about another requirement the state has us do, which is our BPAC.
So any school that has a bilingual program is also required to have a BPAC, which stands for Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee. Its whole purpose is just to try to bring bilingual parents into the school as much as possible, to inform them, to involve them. We're required to have a meeting 4 times a year, and these meetings, as of late, the past few years, they've been through Zoom, so they've mostly been informational in nature. We've had meetings on the types of assessments that not just our EL students, but all students take, and then more importantly, how parents can access the school reports that they're given and what they mean, what are the students' strengths, what are their challenges, how they can help with their students' learning at home. We've also had BPAC meetings related to the different instructional approaches that we use in our push and pull out models. And then more recently, some technology trainings for our parents, especially this year was a big change with Schoology coming in. So we had a training showing parents how to access the parent portal, how to use it to communicate to teachers and the messages and just all the different pages of Schoology. Even as teachers, it's been hard to learn, so I think it was helpful for our parents as well. Document translation. So any family that indicates that another language other than English is spoken at home is also given a language waiver form. So on this form, parents, families indicate whether they would like communication sent home in their native language, which currently these are the languages that we send information home in, or they can waive the right and choose to receive information only in English. And then once we've gathered this information, it's all compiled on a spreadsheet, sent out to the teachers just so that they're aware of the preferred language that parents wish to be communicated to it.
Again, we would like to thank you for your time. Is there any questions? I know it's a lot.
I just want to point out, thank you all very much for tonight, but also for all the work that you do. It's significant, a lot of supports, a lot of resources that you as a Board of Education are providing to our students with a really talented team doing the implementation. So thank you, and I'm quite familiar, and yet when I hear the whole overview, certainly acknowledging the complexity of it all, the commitment that our district has, but also the those of you doing the day in and day out work of it, really, even tonight, demonstrate your commitment to it. I also want to point out, and you all know this too, that this group and those that aren't here tonight really did an outstanding job throughout the pandemic. There was a lot of extra outreach that families that perhaps were bilingual, not speaking English as their first language, that the sort of disconnect that the pandemic brought really to all families in our school district was really challenging, but certainly there were families that I know you were very, very concerned about and doing a lot of extra outreach and making sure that they understood how to access when it was time for remote education, it was time for hybrid education, it was time to come in during a pandemic. So just thank you all very much. Thank you, and didn't mean to sort of interject first because maybe there are questions. I mean, I don't know that you as a board have ever heard sort of the in-depth overview of all of this.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
No, and I appreciate the detail that you went through. Now, a question I had was, you're required to provide TBE when there are 20 students in the building. Part of me is surprised that there aren't more than 20 at Hauser. So does that mean some students kind of graduate out?
Yes, so they access. So when I say 20, they have to be identified as English learners at that specific point. So when we're a houser, we're only counting the ones that at that point are considered still ELs. So we don't have, but we do have our Spanish population is a lot higher than that. We've had a lot of students that have actually exited and graduated before they get to houser, but yes. But that number is slowly starting to to rise up.
And this might be more, is it easier for a student to graduate out? Sorry, I'm not thinking quite the right words, but graduate out when they're younger versus older. Like, is language acquisition, learning English, tougher when they're in those upper grades?
It really depends on their proficiency level that they're coming in, and also there's so many other factors, home factors, and how much exposure our students are that really takes into consideration when it comes to whether they exit. The majority though of our students do exit around grade 3 or 4 if they've received support from the beginning. And just like a little bit of studies show that if EL students get the proper support, they will reach the proficiency 5 to 7 years, but if they do not receive the support they're needed, it could take longer than that. So I always like to think of it as like that moving train, where here are ELs, there's the general education, and then there's our EL students, and they're always trying to kind of, there is a point where they do surpass monolinguals, and those are just studies that showed, and that's why we really emphasize to the parents the importance about the program, and also about the importance of maintaining their native language and making sure that it is a priority at home. Because sometimes, unfortunately, EL, there's a stigma that comes with it, and I think it's just not knowing what the program is, or because programs are very different in other districts, that when parents come here and they see that we are sending out the form saying that they qualify, they are kind of like taken aback and a little scared about it. But once we explain what the program is and how we qualify, that not every student just means because they speak Spanish or they will be placed in native language instruction, that it really comes down to their proficiency language. And we have a lot of students that actually, it's sad because I want more kids to actually be fluent in their native language, but they're not. We're having more and more students that their parents are fluent, but the kids are not. They're losing that language, and we stress the importance of it. So we're very, again, thank you for allowing us to provide that support, because the ones that do qualify for it truly become what we call biliterate. They learn how to read, write in Spanish and English. It's not just speaking it and understanding it. And then when they get to RB, they can get the seal of biliteracy, which is awesome.
That's always one thing I've always been envious of Europe. I feel like everybody, I mean, blanket statement, but I've met a number of Europeans that speak 4 or 5 different languages, and I can't even speak 2. So, used to speak German, poor choice in high school. Should have took Spanish. I got an easy one for you, just at the end here with I was looking at the different languages before this meeting. I was just kind of curious, and you made a statement, preferred language, or the language that the parents prefer to be communicated in. How do the teachers facilitate that? Like, do we use a translation service, or?
There is a translation service that is used for official documents that the district provides. There are newsletters that sometimes teachers provide, and we do use Google Translate, which the parents, the parents are we always say we're really sorry. I know that sometimes, and there are times where teachers will for our Spanish-speaking teachers like myself or someone else, they'll send us the Google Translate, and it's you just look at it to make sure it sounds okay. Our EL parents are wonderful. They're actually very just thankful that we are taking the steps and that we do provide it in their language, so they understand that it might not be the best, but we do. And sometimes you will see us trying to communicate with a Polish-speaking or a Malayan parents with our phones, and we will speak to it, and then they do the same thing, and we make it work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like our district communications, our school messenger service has a translation that we think is pretty good, and Kathy actually does that through the service that we have.
Okay. Yeah, I figured like more formal stuff. I was just thinking like that quick email or whatever the teachers send. Like I know some of that is embedded in Google, but I don't know how good it is. So that's why I was kind of curious.
Google's upfront when it comes to like, and when parent-teachers conference comes to, we do have translators that come in to translate. And that is also kind of a state requirement that they don't allow, like I could easily translate or Danae could easily translate, any of us could easily translate, but the state does not allow for the teachers in the actual building to translate. It's more for like conflict issues. Like they want to make sure that there's no bias and that the information is given accurate. So we do have to hire someone to come and translate for IEP meetings or any formal kind of meeting. If it's on the go, then we're usually the ones that they call.
With how do we support kids around, since we're in testing week, like how do we support kids around testing and like making sure that they understand the questions? Do we give them extra time? Do we translate for them? Like what does that look like?
That's a great question.
Yeah, we don't translate. It depends. The state does have like an accommodations manual that they send out, and then we take a look at what the accommodations are that we are able to give our EL students, because the state wants to make sure that to like level the playing field, but not so that they still want to make sure that we can see where they're at. So when it comes to like IR testing, they're able to test in a small setting. They're giving a few more breaks, but other than that, unless they're a Spanish speaker, they are able to get the Spanish test for math only. And before, the state would say that if we had a newcomer, it was their first year, they weren't required to take the ELA. Unfortunately, they took that away. And now they are to take. So like luckily she's still not here, so she's gonna miss it, because it's very frustrating to see them. It's just like, do your best, it's not accurate. But the state's reasoning behind it was that it serves as a baseline to where they're at. We don't agree, but yeah.
Measuring nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, but we do. There are accommodations.
And they do test in a small group.
They do.
Because they have
Okay.
extended time. And the math test can be read to them.
Can we see that in our date, like when we're doing some of these like demographic things, like can we parse that out, or is that just at the individual level for like the MTSS thing, or like how do we?
I think we can
Yeah.
pull out, I know we can pull out our EL data. It does pull out our EL data. The reason why I'm thinking is just, you have to hit a certain threshold for it to report. So I'm just trying to figure out if the reports at our district level, might have enough numbers, because then it's also looking by grade level. So it depends on how many at each grade level,
Okay.
yeah.
So it probably isn't overly impactful then. If we've only got 20 kids out of, whatever population, it's probably not enough to really impact numbers or anything like that.
Not overall.
Yeah.
Although the state still does take in consideration for like just audit purposes and how we're doing, they do take a look at our access data and see the rate in which our students are exiting the program and their growth, and then they take that to see where we're at as a district. So in case of an audit, they do take a look in consideration
And
at our access data.
Our access data is part of our school report card as well. And then in a bit, I'll talk about another part of the report card, which is the equity continuum journey. And that piece does look at our EL data for growth and proficiency on IAR.
And most importantly, we know those individual scores, so we can use that to help with any individualized supports that are needed. Yeah, okay. I got one more question and then I'll stop. With the push and pull out models, just as you were kind of talking, and there's different levels of understanding of English, is the push in kind of like to help in the classroom understand what's going on, and the pull out is more because you said like there's no core instruction that's missed, but if you're not understanding the instruction, like, is that what the push in is for, is to just help them understand like what's being taught, or like the content, and like
Yes, to be there, like to modify, to translate if need to. We have newcomers, or just to provide support in the classroom. Sometimes we will have like small groups, and when they're broken into in the classroom, usually push in, we really look at students that, I know it's gonna go a little crazy, but when we are giving access scores, we're giving 3 different levels. So you have a tier A, that would be considered a newcomer student. Then we have a tier B. Students in the tier B are like middle down the road, their English proficiency is coming along, and a level C, it would be the highest proficiency. So they're close to exiting. So when we're looking like who gets push in and pull out, a lot of the students that get the push in services is more the students that are close to exiting. They still need that support, but they would benefit from being in the classroom, listening to their classmates, getting the information in the classroom. Then there's other times where we do have to push in. It's more because of scheduling issues. Again, there are students that get math interventions, reading interventions, that have special education. So sometimes with scheduling, it's hard, and we also don't want to take them from core instruction, so then we push in.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not sure if my question is actually a question about special education, so I don't know if Pam, but when you mentioned the outplay students, and I know we probably don't have, you know, a large proportion of them, but do those institutions offer like an integrated language instruction? It seems like it would be very natural, because then they could have both for their special education interventions. I was surprised that everyone's driving, and so I don't know.
They're the responsibility of the home district.
Right, which I understand, right, there are students, but I was surprised that they didn't offer something.
They would have to have enough, again, that number of 20.
Gotcha.
Which would probably be.
We do have one student who's outplaced whose teacher is EL certified, so she is providing.
Oh, that's good.
So we do ask if their teacher is EL certified, and at that point then they provide the services, and I or someone else will consult with them. So like right now I have a student that I consult with their teacher once a month to talk about like the language proficiency. The teacher does have the certification, so she's able to provide support. But if the teacher does not have the certification, then we are to find a way to provide services.
Right, well, I appreciate whoever's doing that. I am surprised that, you know, that doesn't happen more, because it would seem like a natural place if you, no matter what kind of interventions, whether it be behavior or anything that's going on, that the language barrier would be something you would want to cross no matter what they're doing. So that would be interesting to hear about later, but I guess that's what we have to do.
Interesting, complex staffing issue for some of
Oh,
those
I'm
special
sure,
education
and I'm sure it would be
institutions,
expensive, but I feel for the people that are, and the student who's having people in and out. So thank you.
Just a comment also, Wesley, when you were talking about the testing, it just made me think about forget language barriers. Sometimes the way in which test questions and exam questions are written, you know, have like lack of cultural awareness. And I remember even, you know, back in law school when taking the bar exam, to widgets and you know, Nerf football. Some people didn't realize Nerf footballs were, you know, softer material, and that really impacted how, you know, the question about assault. Anyway, but digressing from that, this resonates. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm back when it was ESL, you know, I went through the ESL program, native Spanish speaker. Unfortunately, am guilty of being the parent that is the native speaker whose children are not quite that. But it sounds like you all are doing, you know, incredible work, of course. But a lot of it is also just educating, right? Like the stigma, educating the families, the community. But you were saying that parents have the option to sort of accept or kind of like decline. So do we have parents that decline? And then kind of what does that look like for those learners? Again, it sounds like you're turning every stone to ensure they don't, but if in fact they do. And then I'm curious what maybe other services, like the students that maybe see like the social worker or the physical therapist, like what does that look like for these individuals?
We do have refusals, there are not that many. I can, for sure, I did have the numbers.
No.
At Central, we have 1 refusal right now, and we do have, there's no refusals at Ames. And at Hauser, we have 2 refusals. So that we really don't, we try really hard. A lot of the parents, once we speak to them and we explain what the program is, they're very willing to, like, yes, absolutely, like, that sounds wonderful. But we can't always, you know, sometimes parents, it's their decision and it's their right. So what we do, we have a form, a refusal form. So we do go through the process where we explain, we go over the screener, what the student scored and how the program looks and how they benefit. We always, when parents do refuse, we always tell them, per state requirements, you are, as a parent, have the right to say at any moment at time that you wish your child to receive the services, they can resume services. They just have to tell us. So we do let them know that, and every year, even though they refuse services, we still send the permission slip every year and let them, and that they have to take access. That is state requirement. Even though they refuse services, they have to take the assessment. Even though we have had in the past a few parents that have said like they don't want the child, they cannot refuse. They have to take the access test, even though they are refusals. But there is a form that they fill out, and then we put it in their file. I go ahead and enter it in the state system, make sure that it's known that it's a parent refusal. And again, we just state that at any moment that they want to resume services, that option is still there. And a lot of our classroom teachers are really good too. Like if we see that the student is struggling or they need support, the teachers will then also contact the parents, and then we'll work together. And then most of the time the parents are willing to resume the services again.
And then just, like other service, like if they see things, social workers, therapists, like, what is that?
They can get social work, they can get OT, any services.
With the exception of newcomers, the majority of our students would be able to have like a social work session in English or PT or speech or whatever.
And the reason we say with the exception of newcomers is that we wouldn't put a newcomer getting reading intervention or math interventions because it's a language barrier. So the first step would be for us to provide support through the the EL program, and then also taking into consideration like their native language. MAP is able to give us reports because MAP can be, we have it in Spanish. So we have given reports in Spanish, the MAP in Spanish for math and reading to see where our newcomers are coming and at their level they're at. And we also have FMP to assess their reading and then take it from there to see where they're at. Because we have some students that come and their background is just that they haven't received formal instruction also in their native language, and that's already something that is.
And as far as social work goes, like I know that the social workers here are amazing in providing information to the parents where they can get services in their native language if needed.
So it doesn't sound like we have a lot of students that speak zero English. There's some level of understanding. It just varies in where they're at. But like most students can actually facilitate a day-to-day.
Yes, social basic, what we would call basic interpersonal language. They are BICs. Well, the BICs, the basic interpersonal communications. That it's there. Yeah, it's more the academic.
Okay.
Yeah, and really, that's like if I'm go talk to a doctor and they start talking like their jargon. I'm like, okay. So it's just like that's how it is. And a lot of our students are actually not first generation; they're second, third generation.
Okay, that was a question in my head. I wasn't going to ask it, but it sounded like it was mostly first generation, but it's not just that. Okay,
No.
Interesting.
And that's why I don't always like the term EL, because they're not English learners. A lot of them are able to speak and understand English fine, and parents do speak English at home. It's just that academic vocabulary that sometimes that the support is still needed. And that's the one thing that we try to stress to our parents, that don't be insulted when you get this permission slip, because some will get insulted and say, my child speaks English just fine. They were born here and we speak it. But it goes back to that academic vocabulary, the language that is spoken in the school to be successful.
Yeah. Like me taking the bar exam.
You know what a Nerf football is? Or a widget. There's lots of those.
I'm wondering, aside from Spanish, it sounds like the vast majority of our students in these programs are Spanish, which would be expected. I noticed at the end we were listing several languages. Is that something that's kind of, we're doing that because they're actual students who have been at one time or another?
They're here. Yeah. They're current students and they're
So these are all current students, these different languages here.
Only that Spanish is the only one that we have enough to provide the TV services. But we have, and there's more that are missing from there, just because these are the ones that parents have actually require that we translate. Documents in their native language, and that's why we have those specifically listed there, that those are the ones that we have to. But we do have students.
I do wonder how those students do in terms of being able to exit the program. Is that in a similar fashion, or Is it maybe not as much in that they don't have as much dedicated, direct education, I guess, in that regard? Not having a direct instructor, I
So they
guess,
don't get
is what
like
I'm
the
thinking of.
bilingual education?
They don't get the,
I think they exit at the same rate.
They exit
If they
the
come here in kindergarten,
Mhm.
then, and they're getting instruction, the EL instruction.
That they
then
usually-
they
Mhm.
see the same rate.
we see the same rate, yes.
Okay,
It's the
that's
ones
great
that
to hear.
sometimes that come from other districts or have not received the support, or, for example, Hauser, when we have newcomers,
coming in.
then, yes. And then there's other factors too that take in consideration when we look at our long-term, what we call a long-term ELs.
Mhm.
This was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I've always known we've had this program, and I've heard the TPI, TBA thing. I don't know if I ever knew exactly the difference between the two.
Yeah.
I do now. I just think this is fantastic, and you clearly are all very knowledgeable in your field. So
Yes.
thank you for
you.
sharing it
Thank you
with
for your
us.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you
you're all
all.
gonna head out, right? You have other things you have to do tonight and tomorrow morning early. So, yeah.
have to go to work. You guys have to come take care of us.
Right. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good evening now for the special education part of the evening for the update. So tonight we'll just be reviewing special education programming and services in District 96 and updating where we are at. Oops, that's the pointer. So first of all, I think it's important to look at the goal of special education. The goal of special education is to enable students to successfully develop at their fullest potential by providing a free and appropriate education. Sometimes you hear that term of FAPE in special education, and that stands for free and appropriate education. Special education is based on federal law of IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and students with individual education plans, or IEPs, should be educated in the least restrictive environment, often referred to as LRE as an acronym, with access to general education to the fullest amount possible. So when we look at special education, the first thing we need to remember is that all students are members of general education. Special education is not a place, it's just a support that provides support to our children in the general education environment. Everyone is a general education student. And when we look at special education programming and services, it begins before children enter the district. Many children come to us through early intervention services. The local agency that provides early intervention services is called Child and Family Connections, and we're part of Child and Family Connections number 7. So this is a program that has services for children ages birth to 3 years of age. And CFC, their services are provided through the Department of Human Services. And in early intervention, services take place in the natural environment of a child at that age, such as the child's home. Sometimes the related service provider go to a child's daycare or at other community locations. If it's a physical therapist, they may go to a park to work on playground equipment or just accessing the community or go to the library, but the natural environment of a child of that age. So at the district, our programming begins with early childhood special education, and that's for children ages 3 to 5. We do receive some referrals from Child and Family Connections, and when we do that, services are to begin on a child's 3rd birthday. We also have preschool screening process, which is an ongoing process. A parent can call us at any time, and we provide preschool screening through ages and stages. It's a questionnaire that many physicians use as well too. And we do the global ages and stages, which is a questionnaire that goes over communication, problem solving, motor development, and social emotional. And then there's a separate social emotional ages and stages as well. And it's important that parents fill that out because at this time, they know their child the best. They're the ones who are with their child all the time. So for our services in early childhood special education, we have varied services. If they are found eligible for special education after coming through early intervention or a preschool screening process, which we then further evaluate at LADSI, we have itinerant speech services where children may come once or twice a week to see one of the speech pathologists in the district to provide speech and language services. We have students with IEPs who are blended in our Early Learners program. And the Early Learners program, as you know, we have approximately, in the blended class, approximately 5 to 6 children with IEPs and approximately 10 to 11 children from the community who pay tuition. They're tuition paying students to be our general education students, which we are required to have that opportunity for inclusive opportunities at the preschool level as well. And then we also have the early childhood special education classroom. We have 2 sections of that classroom. That is for children who only have IEPs, who at the time may require a smaller structured classroom setting with more adult support. And then there are the LADSI special education programs, and we are part of the LADSI Special Education Cooperative, which is the LaGrange Area Department of Special Education, and they also have some programs that are more specific for students. They have a phonological speech program, which is a great program. Some children at a young age have phonological disorders, which is a specific sound production concerns, and it's very important to correct those sound patterns because it can impact reading and writing down the road. So it's important to provide services in that. And then there's also a communication development program for preschool that LADSI has, which is a program that serves children more on the autism spectrum. So in grades K through 8 in the district, again, we do have itinerant speech and language services. We have hearing or vision itinerant services, and that's also provided for children in the preschool program too. If they have a vision or hearing impairment, that would require another specialist to come in and work with the early childhood teachers. And our early childhood teachers are duly certified in early childhood education, special education, and actually they're tri-certified. They are also endorsed as English learning teachers, EL teachers. We then have special education teacher support in the district. And this is much like what EL was talking about, services delivered in the general education setting where they're pushing in. We refer to it as push-in minutes that they deliver. They deliver services outside of the general education setting. It could be in a small group. And some children have those services with alternate curriculum outside of the general education setting. That's typically for English language arts and math. And then we, at Hauser, has our small group instruction classes at each grade level, 6, 7, and 8, for English language arts and math. And then Hauser also has the co-taught classes where there's a special education teacher in the classes with students. We have some students who attend public day programs through LADSI. LADSI has programs for multi-need students, students with autism, and then also emotional disabilities. And then SACID is another cooperative that LADSI belongs to as well, and they have programs for students who require a classroom setting for blind and visually impaired or deaf and hard of hearing. And then we have some students who attend private day programs when the support of a LADSI or SACID program is not enough to meet students' needs. And all of these settings that we talk about are based on individual student needs and the type of setting they require to meet those needs. Related services are the therapies. They are the supports that are provided to students in order to access their educational program. And students, in order to have the therapies, must have identified needs in areas through an evaluation process to access these services. And then IEPs are written with an educational focus for each of these related services. Speech and language therapy is provided by a speech and language pathologist, fine motor, occupational therapist, gross motor physical therapist, counseling or social work by a social worker. Assistive technology, we have assistive technology specialists through LADSI that we're able to access, and the vision and vision and hearing itinerants teachers that also help support, and then transportation is also considered a related service. So when we look at percentages of students with disabilities from FY18 to FY21, we're looking at ISBE report card data here. And you can see that the district's numbers are the same or a little bit lower than some cases with the state. This number can, ebb and flow depending on students who are identified, students who are dismissed from special education. Also, sometimes I think numbers can be a little bit lower dependent on the quality of the multi-tiered intervention support services, which we have, and not just looking to provide a student with supports and help by identifying them with a disability. We can provide services without that. And this is the percentages of students with disabilities by race and ethnicity. We do look at this because we want to make sure that we are not over-identifying students. I know our number of Hispanic students with IEPs is one that we watch very carefully. I know our psychologists are very cognizant of this as well too. We do, whenever there is a student where there's another language spoken in the home and the student speaks some language as well too, we work with the EL teachers to determine is this just acquiring new language if a student is struggling, or do we have concerns in that language? If there are concerns of their ability to learn in their home language, we always will complete a bilingual evaluation with a psychologist, a speech and language pathologist, who can speak the home language. We have noticed too that we are getting more and more children. I've noticed this over the past few years of students coming to us from early intervention services who are Hispanic, who are receiving services in early intervention. And being in early intervention does not automatically mean that you are eligible for special education. We still need to identify that there is a disability. Early intervention is a bit different in the fact that in early intervention, it's not necessarily you are eligible for early intervention just because of a disability. They also accept students because of at-risk factors. So we do explain that to families when we're going through the transition process from early childhood to early childhood special education. This is a 4-year trend data for students with disabilities by race and ethnicity, and you can see it was a little bit what I was talking about before. In 2021, you do see that there is a bit of a decrease, so it looks like we're going in the right direction with that. At the same time, I don't want to just lower the numbers. We need to make sure that we're identifying, providing services as needed. And this is the percent of students with IEPs by disability category from fiscal year 2021, and its comparison with each area of disability with the state. When you look at developmental, that's developmental delay, you can see our number is quite a bit higher. Part of that, I think we do a pretty good job of child find in the district, but you need to keep in mind that when we look at the state data, there are high school districts in there who are not going to have early childhood, so that's part of the reason the number is lower as well. With specific learning disability, that area, I think that number may be a bit lower because of multi-tiered levels of support as well. And I think sometimes that is an area that can be over-identified a bit too. Speech and language is a bit higher. Again, that takes place, that high school factor can be taken into consideration as well there. Typically, students by middle school and even upper elementary, most of the time, speech and language impairments. If that is the only area of disability, doesn't mean that other children, but that is the only area that they are identified in is their area of eligibility. Most children, as they become older, are dismissed from special education.
Can I ask, what's the difference between specific learning and speech and language?
Specific learning disability would be a disability in a reading. It could be decoding, it could be encoding, written language, or math areas.
So that's specific learning, so speech and language? Then?
Speech and language is specifically communication. It would be articulation, expressive language, receptive language, or pragmatic language skills. And then we look at educational environments for students with IEPs, and this is where that term least restrictive environment and LRE comes in. As we are supposed to be instructing students and providing them their education in the least restrictive environment, we want to be in the two groups of numbers to the left side. We want those to be higher numbers, and we want our numbers on the right to be lower. And you can see we are higher, and the 80% or more in general education, that's where we want to see kids. Then we have the next area inside general education. That number is a little bit lower than the state, but then our 80% is much higher. And then we want to see our numbers lower of inside general education, less than 40%, and a separate facility. So we want to be lower there.
Wait, I'm sorry. What did those mean again?
So
it all sounds the same to me. So what's the?
Sure.
It's like in.
So we want our students with IEPs to be in general education 80% of the time or more.
In the classroom.
In the general
Okay.
education classroom,
What's
not
the
pulled out for speech, not pulled out for other services. We want them learning in the general education environment that's considered the least restrictive environment as much as possible.
So then what's the difference between the 40 to 79? How do I read
That's,
that?
we look at minutes. We look at the percentage of
Minutes.
time.
40% of their day.
Minutes
Okay.
per week that they are in.
No, you got me.
Yeah,
I'm
got it
there.
now, okay.
Okay, thank you.
I know it's confusing. And this is our four-year trend data with environments compared to the state. And you can see we have a lot of blue, that's good. And our blues tend to be higher across those 4 years than even the state average. And we want our green and yellow to be lower. So as we look at special education in the district, some of our next steps, we want to continue to monitor that least restrictive environment for students with IEPs, but at the same time, we need to keep in mind individual student needs. There are students who do need a smaller environment at times in order to support their learning. And we want to continue to examine and monitor the student needs to ensure appropriate staff is in place. We look at our number of students, number of services that they need, and we continue to monitor that each year. We also want to monitor the children coming from early intervention birth to 3 services to plan for future district programming. Those numbers coming from early intervention are very helpful in helping us to determine what programming needs to be moving forward. Continue to work with outside agencies to support our students. You know, we do work with, our social workers work with other referrals to other, community counseling services, and we want to keep those relationships and keep those services in mind. And then work and plan for a smooth transition for special education leadership this next year, or the following year. Are there any questions?
I just have a question. Since there's going to be a transition to all-day kindergarten, and there might be students flowing in from different schools, I know kindergartners usually get screened before they attend? Like, is there a way to know what, I don't know if we need any more support services for any additional students coming in, or maybe it won't be them. It's hard to know, I guess, who's going to transition over.
Well,
But-
you mean children coming from our early learners
No,
program?
I just mean because we're offering full day, like I wonder, if we'll have a bump in our student population, would we be prepared for any additional needs?
That's always hard to say, even with half-day programming.
It's hard to know who's coming
Sometimes
in,
we know
yeah.
and sometimes we don't.
Do-
It depends on if parents are comfortable,
Right.
bringing a child to preschool screening to know that. I think the
Right.
screening at the beginning of the year that Angela works with the team, I think that's a good way
Right.
to at least have an idea.
Yeah.
But even with that, we have to look at,
Yeah.
early childhood preschool education isn't mandatory. Kindergarten
Right,
is supposed to
right,
be your
right.
first experience, so we
Right.
need to give kids time
To adjust, yeah.
settle in and adjust before we look at anything.
Yeah, do most of the parents usually want the screening when they come in with their kindergartners, and do most participate?
I don't participate in the kindergarten screening.
Yeah.
Maybe Angela can
Do most
mention
parents
that
want
more.
that, or do?
Everybody's required
Yeah,
to do it.
I know it's been a while. I was thinking, I remember my child doing it, but I remember it was required, but thank you, I wasn't sure about that. So I think it's hard to know, obviously, who's coming in, but.
Right.
I'm
Preschool
glad-
screening is not, it's typically if a child has concern, or a
Right.
parent has concerns about
Right,
their
or
child.
if a doctor were to recommend something, right.
And we do get parents who have said the physician suggested that my
Right.
child be screened. so.
Gotcha.
And if anything, there may be, right, an advantage of the full-day program to be able to spread services.
Oh,
It really
throughout
will
the
be.
I would
day
imagine, yeah,
more.
I was just wondering, I wonder what kind of our population,
Yeah.
but I guess we'll never know until we have the kiddos come
Right.
over, but,
Yeah, I think it will be a real advantage
Yeah.
with full-day kindergarten because when we look at our children coming from preschool with IEPs who have services, our goal is to keep them in the general education environment as much as possible. Because when you pull kids from general education, it is shown that children become further and further behind. It's better to have them in and help support them.
Okay.
So when you look at 2.5 hours, and if a child has 3 different types of therapies, they're being pulled from that
right.
classroom a lot. So it should be
I know, and you would
beneficial.
hate them only to be part of the specials and not to be part of the regular classroom.
Right,
So, yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I wonder, I'm actually sort of surprised, well, maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I'm wondering, were there any impact in those numbers you were showing us from the pandemic? I guess what we've seen in the general education population.
Actually,
It
those
was-
numbers, well, I'm going back. The 1 year, the data, 2021, that is part of the pandemic. If we look at it next year, there may be because we have identified a few kids who are struggling a bit more, or children that were home during that time who are struggling even more so now that we've had to look at alternate, settings. So it may look a little different next year.
I mean, is it possible that there's some kids out there that we're not identifying that would have been identified previously due to the pandemic?
Probably more at the kindergarten, first grade level. I think those years may be a little bit harder hit. There are some children who never attended preschool. I mean, especially as preschool's not mandatory.
Right.
Parents had their kids at home then. So I think we'll gradually see some of
Part of
this.
determining disability is that you have to rule out educational disadvantage. And so there's, I think for some kids, they still just need this time
It's
to be
hard, you have to
adjusting
give
to
them a little
school.
time first.
So Dan, I think I initially heard your question differently. You're wondering if the numbers are lower than what they should be because we haven't been identified, just because of
There's
issues
kind of
being.
two aspects to it. Yes, I guess I'm wondering, the current total's lower
Yeah.
because we're not identifying as many kids, but then also the aspect of it is our kids having worse time.
We
or-
still
or-
did evaluate through the pandemic, actually. We did evaluate as there were concerns and parents had concerns. We did evaluate. Even parents who had chose to do at-home learning did feel comfortable bringing their child in if it was one-on-one with an adult with plexiglass screen and what have you. So we still, continued the child find process.
I think that's great that you're able to do that during all that crazy time to have
Yeah.
them come in, yeah.
It was a little different, but they
Yeah.
were able to do it.
I'm just trying to think, would the pandemic cause anything that would qualify here? I'm just looking at your chart with like the list of disabilities, and I'm just thinking like, we've seen some issues with the broader student population, but I don't know, like, would the pandemic, like, the pandemic wouldn't cause a speech deficiency or something like that. I'm just thinking like, is there something about the pandemic that would push somebody into like an IEP type situation, or
I
is
don't
that-
think so necessarily. I think it may, for some children, I think if they had areas of concern dependent on their disability, it may have been more impactful
Make it worse?
for them.
Okay.
Mhm. Especially when it comes to social skills and things such as that.
And I
If
know
you're
there's been
isolated, and that's
some
difficult
initial
anyway.
research about like the masks and early reading and early speech and language development, and indicators are interestingly no, that kids did continue to learn, that, you know, I think teachers found creative ways to, I mean, we don't know, we don't
Yeah.
fully know the impact
Yeah.
of the pandemic yet. I mean, I think that's.
I actually did
that's
have
honest.
one of our speech pathologists last year, say, boy, this one child who was having difficulty working on articulation and sound production because they were looking at me directly in the screen, and they were, looking back, it actually improved when they were looking screen to screen, so.
Interesting.
Kind of the old mirror thing. That speech paths use sometimes.
And I think we've also heard is when kids returned in person, they became a lot more interactive, so I mean, there's
a lot, yeah.
different children have responded so differently, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You said something that was in my head, you said it out loud, with the data. On the demographic chart, like, you look at it to make sure you're not over-identifying within any particular population. Which I think is, you use the data to kind of figure out where you're there, but how do we use that data and then not manage to a number, if that makes sense? Like, how do you, because this is so individualized, how do we make sure that students that truly need it, do need it, and they're not being stunted or like prevented from being in it because we're already at, 25% or something like that? Like,
When it comes to disability, even if we were to go, if our numbers were to be high, if it was a child with a disability, that's what comes first,
Okay.
that child with a disability.
so we just use it to make sure we're not over applying it and like in any particular area,
Right.
but it's still like, we just use that to say, look at those assessments a
Just to
little bit
kind of
closer,
monitor.
make sure,
Right,
yeah, okay.
Right, just to make sure that if the number does become high, we want to make sure we're not over-identifying.
Right.
That legitimately, we have found that this child does have identified needs that require.
Okay,
And
so
I-
it's like a check.
Yeah, and I would say you're not really you're not managing to the number, you're monitoring for that number. And if the state were to intervene, what they're really asking is, do you have good, clear processes to make sure
Okay.
that you're not over-identifying?
Right. Are
Like
you
the use of
using-
bilingual evaluations.
Yes, are you
and,
conducting
that-
bilingual, or are
Yeah.
you just, having an English-speaking psychologist complete the
Gotcha,
evaluation?
okay.
Not taking in the cultural differences and all
Yeah.
those pieces, as well as the language.
So basically ensuring that like language barriers not being
Yes.
identified as a disability,
Oh, I just have it's maybe a silly question or a stupid question because I can't remember. Can you remind me what a 504 plan is, how it's different?
Sure.
And do we have students in our district with a 504 plan? Because I know this talks about students with IEPs, and I know it's a different type of
Sure.
set of modifications, but can you explain that?
So,
Yeah.
an IEP, a student has an identified disability, and there are deficits in their learning that require goals
Right.
to address their learning deficits and needs. A 504 plan is where a child has an identified disability and is on target academically but requires accommodations.
Yep.
An IEP has goals and accommodations.
Right.
A 504 plan is just accommodations.
Thank you. It's been so long
Yeah.
since I've had to with my own
No, that is confusing.
students, but yeah, and I because they wouldn't be represented here, but they might be someone who might have extra minutes or
Right.
just some other accommodation.
Or they
depending
can
on-
be medical
It
accommodations.
could be medical, exactly. It could be who knows
Right.
what, but thank you. Yeah.
That's good clarity.
Yeah.
So is it, is it easy to say like special education equals IEPs? Like
Yes.
only IEPs are
Mhm.
considered under
Students
the,
with
because I feel like
IEPs.
special education is kind of broad, but IEP is
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
specific.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They have an individualized education plan. Their disability is determined by an evaluation. That is the same for our 504 as well, too. And their plan has goals to meet those identified areas of needs. They have accommodations.
It's like a super structured,
Yes.
formal thing. Okay, so 504s would not be.
Right.
Okay.
They don't talk about minutes. We talk about minutes in special education, the amount of minutes that you're going to receive from a special education teacher, from related service providers.
Okay.
We look at the minutes in general education and out of general education, where 504 students are in general education all the time.
I know that the IEP families have regular meetings. Does that happen with the 504 plan, or is that usually
Yes,
before?
they
Is
do.
it the same frequency or less? Like,
We do them annually,
okay.
and it's more of a quick check-in.
Right.
Just to see if there's any changes or needs.
Right, okay.
Especially with the medical ones, we want to make sure that
Right, that you
nurses
have
are up to date on medications.
what's on hand
what
that they
needs to be
need,
done.
or,
Yeah.
right, or their teacher knows. Thank you. Yeah.
Is it pretty like clear cut, or perhaps in the instances where it's not, do you try to start perhaps because of 504 is least restrictive, and maybe you start 504 and then if that's not meeting needs, then add the goals and move them into IEP?
So actually, what often happens if a child is struggling, that's where the multi-tiered or MTSS process comes into place. And we can use the data from interventions and reading and math, use that as well to determine eligibility. And with a specific learning disability, you do use that MTSS data to help determine that, along with any other testing that needs to take place. And sometimes, if you're kind of between, if a child has a disability, but learning, as you mentioned, seems to be on target, you may want to try with some accommodations
First.
in a trial MTS type of way to see if that helps, and if it does, you can go that route as well. So you can also have interventions in social emotional as well. Should I just stay here for the
Sure.
next part of this?
Thank you, Pam, for
Yes.
the overview
Scoot
of
over.
special education. We've given you two of the most complicated parts of our work of a public school district in terms of the supports and services. But we wanted to, right? I mean, we want to make sure that you always, as the board, have as much insight as we can possibly provide to
I was just
the great work
thinking
that's
how
gone into the
refreshing
district.
it is to hear about educational programming.
Right?
It's not related to the pandemic. I was like, this is like, this feels good.
Yeah.
Agreed.
When you brought up the pandemic earlier, but you were like, did the pandemic? And I was like, oh, we almost went to talking about the pandemic.
Sorry, that was me.
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
One of these days.
So Angela, Don, and Pam all are, we're going to do our
Hopefully.
kind of
Maybe next year, maybe.
update, relatively quick update on our strategic plan, goals 1, 2, and 3, keeping that rotation going, so.
6 months.
Okay, so I will start with goal 1. As I begin with goal 1, I do want to touch base on our mathematics curriculum review cycle, just to give you an update quickly on where we're at with that. We just finished piloting Everyday Mathematics 4. We had 10 teachers who piloted it across kindergarten through 5th grade, as well as one of our advanced learning teachers piloting it as well. We received great feedback, some successes with the pilot, some concerns with the pilot, so things that we'll revisit after the second pilot, which we started this past Monday. The second pilot that we're in the middle of right now, we're just beginning right now, is with iReady Classroom Mathematics. And so we have started that one, same teachers piloting this one as well. And so far, things have seemed to be going well. Nobody has reached out with any concerns or problems, so you know, if they were having problems, if they were having concerns, they would have said something. So right now, we're feeling that no news seems to be good news. So we will run this pilot through the next 3 weeks, and then we'll debrief on this pilot, and then talk about both pilots as a whole, and talk about if one of them might be a better resource for us than Math and Focus. So that's the math pilot. With our strategic plan and goal 1, Full day kindergarten was one of our strategies. We know where we're at with that. Our kindergarten team is so excited. We are beginning planning stages, have looped in a couple of teachers who are moving from different grade levels to kindergarten and have started working as a new team on play-based learning, what that will look like so that we're consistent across all 4 schools. We are looking at some professional learning opportunities for the team to attend. They're also going to do a book study that they're working on right now, picking the book that they want to do. And what's been great about this whole thing is it's all driven by them. So these are ideas that I had, and Ms. Gorman and I were going to approach them with, but they beat us to the punch and said, can we do this? Can we do this? Is there time and money for this? So they are very excited. They are in the stages of planning. We've looped in the new teachers, and it's going well. It's just fun to be a part of. Standards-based reporting is also a strategy, and within goal number 1, we had our first action team meeting on March 15th. At that meeting, we talked about the purpose of grading as we see it right now, who the intended audience is when we look at grades as they are now, and just what the function is of grades currently. We talked about a potential timeline for our work. This is work that will take time. It is work that we are projecting to last pretty much the length of our strategic plan, with the rest of this year being about establishing the committee and beginning the background work, getting team feedback on the timeline that we presented to them, and then we're going to be setting trimester goals for the following school year, for the 22-23 school year. Next year, we want to work on the committee, strengthening their background on standards-based reporting, and then beginning to share out with our staff members and working to set trimester goals in for the 23-24 year. We'll continue staff education during 23-24 and then begin sharing out with families that year as well, and working then for setting our goals for the 24-25 year. And then during 24-25, we will have family education around standards-based reporting, the why, the what, the how, and then look to roll out in the 25-26 school year, should that be the direction that the action team determines we would want to go. So very exciting work being done there with our action team leaders, Ms. Hefner and Katie Kasla, who is the student coordinator at Hauser Junior High. And then equity and opportunity is another strategy within Goal 1. And the wonderful thing about equity and opportunity is that it laces through all of our strategies. It's not just something about student achievement. It really is something that we need to look at with all of our strategies. So as we have these different action teams, we are looking at it with an equity and opportunity lens as well. But the Illinois State Board of Education has also put out an indicator that will be included on the state report cards, starting with this new release, this last release for this year's report card that will come at the end of April. The Illinois State Board of Education is committed to equity, and the way they define equity is high expectations for every learner and providing supports and resources so that each learner can meet those high expectations. And so with that, they've created the Equity Journey Continuum, which is an informational tool for districts to track their progress toward closing gaps in student achievement, opportunities, and supports. The Equity Journey Continuum tool is going to analyze a continuum of district-level data points, which we currently report to ISB. So things like kids' readiness data, IAR growth and proficiency, students, 8th grade students who are in Algebra 1, as well as those students that are in Algebra 1 and how many of them are passing. 5 Essentials Climate Survey is another one. Also looking at suspensions, expulsions, those rates. And then our educator demographics compared to our student demographics, our administrator demographics compared to students, and our evaluation rates. So all of those are things already on our state report cards, our school report cards. They're using that then and giving it certain points for the equity continuum journey. The equity elements included in the continuum are consistent, they're statewide, measurable, and within a district's control. The data points illustrate a district's current progress and its equity journey from step 1, which would be large gaps, to step 4, which would be minimal gaps, in 3 areas. So there will be a score for student learning, a score for learning conditions, and a score for elevating educators. The report card will publicly display a very high-level view for the public of our equity journey continuum. So what we'll see on the school report card is the district step for those 3 broad areas. The school district can drill down and see the individual data scores for those different pieces within those broad areas, but the public sees our score just at the broad level. The 22 equity journey continuum, the 2022 equity journey continuum, will use data from 2018-19 because they're taking into account the disruptions in data due to COVID-19. So the report that we'll get at the end of this month has data from 18-19. Then the report we'll get, when we're back on track with our school report cards, the report we'll get November 1st of 2022. That will have our data from 21-22. And then the 23 report card will have the data from 22-23. So it's just this report card that we'll see at the end of April that will have data from 2 years ago. And the goal of the equity journey continuum is really to empower school communities to make informed decisions about our district's equity strengths, our areas for growth, and where we would want to invest our efforts and our resources. The equity journey continuum, because it's using data that's already out there, it's not embargoed. So right now what we're looking at is for student learning, we are showing a score of 3, which is right below, that's not true. We're showing a score of 2, which is right above large gaps, and I can't remember the exact word for it off the top of my head, sorry. And then for our other 2, we have a score of step 3, which is right below that minimal gap piece. So we do have some work to do in our student learning, but we also have a lot of successes within student learning, and so that's what we'll continue to do, is drill down in it. The equity journey continuum is new, and we are all, as administrators, district level administrators, still getting professional learning on it. This is like the very intro professional learning on it, and then I'll be attending webinars that will break down each of those broad areas to help us better understand how those scores are developed. So those are the updates for Goal 1.
Any questions about Goal 1 before we move on?
I want to put in a quick plug for a book I read over spring break called Blind Spot, which is all about, so the name of the book is because your retina has a blind spot in the back of it, and there's this, the very first page of the book is these 2 plus signs and a dot in the middle, I think is how it went, and it's like, put this up so far away and one of the things goes away. And it's like, so it's showing you where your blind spot is. So the whole book is, if you like neuroscience or like psychology, I don't know if it's officially psychology, but brain science type stuff, it's phenomenally interesting. But the main point where they actually talk about school settings and like equity applies all over the place. But it's just like, being human, you have bias, you have blind spot, right? Like everything you intake, you translate differently and you spit it back out to the world. And that creates all the differences that we have. And one of the interesting things they were relating to school is these 2 authors developed these tests called implicit association tests, which I don't know, you guys might know about those, but I kind of heard of them, but I didn't really understand them. But it's basically quickly answer, like put 2 things in columns. It doesn't take very long to do, but then you measure, they like switch the things together, and so it's measuring how easy can your brain associate opposing things versus similar things, and then the difference between that tells you what your preferences are. And so like the first test was insects versus flowers, and like good words versus bad words, and if you did certain thing you had a preference one way or the other. But there is a thing related to schools and girls in particular, when they were trying to assess why more men are in certain things, and it, like, you know, decades ago it was, well, men just have better abilities with these things than women or something. And it's like a lot of these tests have shown, like, well, I mean, I think today most of us would say that's probably not true. But in the school environment, a lot of times teachers will say, well, math equals boys, not girls. And then they, like, unknowingly treat girls differently, right? Like you don't push them towards science or math, and so it's like this growing thing of like, where is the root cause of more women not being in certain industries? So there's all kinds of examples. There's like all kinds of studies going back to like the 1930s a lot of like racial things, a lot of gender equality, a lot of just like all kinds of different. It's just, I don't know, it was fascinating. I love that stuff, so I think it fits in a lot with kind of that whole idea that the state and at other levels they're trying to do about just like really defining what equity is, and it's really just making sure you're giving everybody an equal opportunity to learn or even have an opportunity, things like that. So I don't know, I enjoyed it. It's about 200 pages. It was fairly easy read. They don't go into super sciencey type stuff, and there's a couple there's a few websites. The tests are free that you can actually take them online if you're interested in trying them out. But
that's actually one of the books that the culturally responsive group was reading in the action team. Yeah.
That's your
That's
vacation.
where I got it from.
There's 2 more books
Okay.
that they have.
I knew I got it from somewhere. I couldn't figure out where I got it from. There's you, Pam. Okay.
And I'm sure Angela knows about this very well, that even when you're a teacher, you know, it's very tricky to make sure that you're calling on everybody equally, that you're not always going to the kid with their hand up, that you're actually, you know, you don't want to frighten the introverts either, but in a way that everyone is getting an opportunity to speak. It's really interesting to watch yourself and to videotape yourself teaching, to realize that you don't realize you're doing these things. But yeah.
Was it just the team that read the book then? Like you guys as a
So there was
committee
2
read the
other
book?
books too, but that was one that we were reading, the culturally responsive action team.
I knew I picked it up from somewhere. I couldn't figure out where I got it, but it's been sitting on my table for 6 months.
Tell us the other 2 books. I'm trying to remember what the other 2 were. Because we started, then we all kind of stopped when the team has reformatted, so we'll probably keep on with that as we
Okay.
move through.
Well, that was a good suggestion. I knew I got it from somewhere.
Before his next vacation.
Yeah. I read 1 book a year.
So we'll go to learning environment and culture. The district leadership team and the action team leaders, as we have some teachers on the action teams as leaders. We met on February 1st with Arlana from CEC, and at that time, besides going through everything that we had done, we were able to really bring those action team leaders together for the first time from the 3 groups of social emotional learning, culture responsive, and also the, drawing a blank, our other group of student-centered learning. So we brought those 3 action team leaders together, and they met, and during that time, we were able to use that time to map out some times for the rest of this year and all of next year for when the action team leaders could meet to start planning, and then times that we would meet with the team members all together. So we kicked off some of our work and began working with the SEL action team leaders, began working with DuPage ROE, as they are part of a hub for SEL that West 40 is part of, and some work with ISBE. So we are working with some of their service providers as they were a little bit further ahead in their work on this, and helping us as being consultants for our SEL work. And the SEL action team leaders, in reviewing some of the information that the original SEL action team put together, thought it was important to start with trauma, our staff being trauma informed, and talk about resilience, because that was one of the areas that they had identified originally, and as it has been a topic since the pandemic. I'm saying a pandemic, sorry about that. So we met with Dr. Sharon Fry and Mary Ellen Young from DuPage ROE, and they presented, and we kicked off our SEL work on February 18th, Institute Day, and they presented to the staff, and their presentation was on Trauma Today, Hope and Help for Ourselves and Students. And I think the staff felt it was very good, it was quite well received, and they really helped to focus on the challenges that everyone has faced during the pandemic, identified at large community, themselves as teachers and students, as a society, what we've dealt with, and how to then move forward. Then our SEL action team also arranged for Mary Ellen Young, who's one of the presenters, to come back for a hybrid parent presentation for families, and that took place middle of February. Unfortunately, it was middle of March, I'm sorry, it was March, it was a month after, wasn't quite as well received as we had hoped. I think that could be because of the fact things were starting to lighten up with the pandemic, and I think people were just kind of done with pandemic at that point, but at least we did present it. And a lot of the information she shared was the same thing that was shared to the teachers, and she felt it important to present to staff first so that they would know what was going to be presented to parents, but she put a little different focus on it for parents. On March 15th, the newly combined SEL Action Team leaders met to plan for our next meeting, which will be April 19th, with the whole newly combined action team. And we reviewed what each group has been working on under that big SEL umbrella, all three groups, the first few months. And we looked at what we've been doing and examined how our work compared with what CASEL looks at in SEL. And CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, which is a very well-known resource for social emotional learning. And when we looked at that framework, it was very interesting that they really saw how they talk about culture responsive teaching for students as part of SEL. And it really helps to define our work and really helps to confirm that our idea to bring these three groups together was really appropriate, because culturally responsive learning and also student-centered learning are right in that SEL part. And so we also reviewed a survey that CASEL has to look at what's in place at a district level, and we decided we would send that out to the action team. So that has been sent out. They completed it very quickly. It's been turned around, their responses are in, so we're going to examine that as our work to look at where we are as we're looking at SEL as a whole district, as we're planning, and what holes we have to fill. And we will be aligning our work to the CASEL rubrics on this and working with Dr. Fries as a consultant as we move forward with the district level work, which she has done before too. That's pretty much it.
Goal number 3.
Okay, well, I'm goal champion for area 3, which is high quality staff. One of the main areas is personal and professional learning, in which Angela is heavily involved, as well as Kim. And it's a fairly large group. I would say of this group, I think of all the goal areas and strategies, this is really one where when they talk about building the plane while it's flying, because with professional development happening and needing to plan for the future and also making adjustments, week to week, month to month, with even this year's plan. I know it's been an adventure, but we actually had a meeting today, and I'll kind of do a micro of what was accomplished today, and then I think Angela can give you a better idea of the macro of the group. But really the group is focused right now on next year and planning for next year. Today, we looked at a variety of kind of professional development models or structures to perhaps base our model off of for next year. So we broke it into groups and really just evaluated some different statewide models from other states around the country and some district level ones. And the goal was identifying the top 3 of the ones that we were looking at, and those would be presented to staff on Monday. And I was able to attend about 90% of it, and I think you got down to 3.
Well, sort of, we changed it.
Oh.
I forgot to leave about 5 minutes earlier, so I missed that end piece. The tricky thing about this is that we are trying to find a one-size-fits-all model for professional learning that will allow us to incorporate any professional learning we need to do into our 75-minute after-school professional learning sessions. So anything that comes from SEL or from Goal 2, we want to be able to use this structure for professional learning. Or when we are working on standards-based reporting, professional learning, be able to plop it into this structure. And so that's the tricky piece. And we thought this year that we might have had it with the structure that we were using this year, but the feedback from the staff was that that structure wasn't working for them. So for the past couple of months, we've taken time to get more feedback from the staff about what would work better for them, what has worked for them in the past. And as a committee, then as a team, we've taken that information, and it led to today's meeting where Don was talking about, we looked at different state level professional models, professional development models, as well as some district level professional development models. And we analyzed it for different professional learning standards, as well as for what our staff members had told us were priorities for them with whatever model we move forward with. And we found not necessarily top 3, but we found bits and pieces that we liked from different models. So what I will be working on tomorrow with Angela Gonzalez is taking those bits and pieces and working to craft our own model with the bits and pieces that fit what we feel District 96 staff members are telling us they need. And we will share that on Monday with the staff to get their feedback on, does this feel better than the models we were using this year, so that we can be more successful moving forward next year. So we are continuing to work on building a framework for professional learning for next year so that we can do the multitude of work that we have coming within any structure during those 75-minute after-school professional learning sessions.
What is it that's not working? Is it the block of 75 minutes that you'd want to do that differently, or is it this?
There are, I think what needs to happen is, you hear a lot about level setting and everybody being on the same page with what something is. So when we think about SEL, level setting the language for SEL so that we're all on the same page with how we're speaking with students and how we're speaking with families. With professional learning, we need to level set what professional learning is and make sure we're all on the same page with what professional learning is. So I think what didn't work for this year was that we, again, building the plane while it's flying, in August, we finished negotiations, and then in August, we said, okay, as a professional learning planning team, we've got to figure out how we're going to do professional learning, what we're going to do for professional learning, and then our first professional learning meeting was probably 2 weeks after our first meeting. And so we came up as a team with, here's what we're going to do, here's what we want to focus on, but we didn't have time to really get the buy-in from the staff. And so we've just been fighting this uphill battle with that structure because there wasn't that buy-in. So now we've taken the time to work better on getting buy-in and understanding where our staff members are coming from so that we're able to build a model that will work better and meet their needs. They want more choice and less top-down directive on this is what we need to do. And there's a place and time for that because there are goals and there are things we're working on as a district. But what we talked about today is that we might all be working on SEL as a district, but each school might be in different places with SEL and have different needs. And so one of the things we talked about is bringing the building leaders in on a little bit more of that discussion, and district leadership giving building leaders the support for them to give their staff members the capacity to maybe work in collaborative groups around the SEL needs of their building. So that's where we're working, is how can we offer a little bit more flexibility, less rigidness in the professional learning that we're doing, because that's what staff members are looking for. They want to have a little bit more of a say, a little bit more of a choice in what they're learning about.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Third complicated area of the district, I'm sorry, EL, special and professional learning.
The other area within Goal 3 is diverse workforce. And we met last on March 10th. And we developed a draft implementation plan. I think we have a good sense of what we're going to do in year 1, which is a lot of the low-hanging fruit. We're gathering data, gathering metrics that we're going to use for our key performance indicators that we can measure some level of progress. But also looking at our internal practices, how we get the word out about District 96 in terms of attending various job fairs, different job boards, how we reach out to particular, whether it's colleges, so forth. So that's one layer that was really more of the obvious kind of next steps, just doing more, seeking different opportunities, different venues promote District 96. The other thing that, where we're starting to focus now is really kind of trying to tap into other resources or individuals. Kim Hefner is also,
Kim had to leave.
She had to step out.
well, she's also on the team, and so she has some contacts that are actually directors of equity within other districts. So we've reached out to the director of equity in Skokie, who's going to come meet with the group in late April, early May, and talk about, well, what are some things that they're doing? You know, what are the things that we're not thinking of? We also leverage a resource in our hiring process, Humax Ventures, and they also have some, potentially have some resources that could assist us in the hiring process as well with that. So now we're, trying to expand out of, what we know that we can improve internally on, and now kind of branching out and seeing what can we add, what can we layer in to help support this goal. Anybody?
How many districts have a, what did you call it? A director of
Yes,
equity?
it's-
More and more.
Is that
more
a
and
new?
more.
I've never heard of that before.
No.
In a school district anyway.
Lights Township, I think,
Really? Okay.
Fenwick.
You know, Oak Park River Forest has one.
Forest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oak Park has one also.
Yeah, 97 has one.
Bigger districts, I'm guessing, that have maybe more of an issue around that, or is it not so much, not necessarily?
And I think maybe some people are adding the title to maybe some other
Okay.
work. I'm trying to think of like elementary, yeah.
I don't know that all of their job descriptions are necessarily the
Yeah.
same. Some of them are focused, are student focused. And so I think it's really
Yeah.
looking at what their actual role is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an interesting question. I don't know the number, but you definitely hear the title more and more, it seems, just even in conversation with other district
That's
leaders.
good, yeah. That's awesome, thanks.
Thanks. All right. Anything else from Education Committee?
Nope. That's it.
Yield your time.
Yeah.
All right, then next is the Finance Committee.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Policy Committee.
Yeah, kind of all quiet on the policy front. I'm assuming we got in our Press 108 stuff by the March 30th?
Trying to get
deadline.
updates that they're being added to our, into our system, so.
So, yeah, thanks again, everybody, for your feedback, input, and thank you for putting everything in and getting us all squared away. But no, nothing else right now that's come down the pipeline.
Okay. And finally, no, not finally, Personnel Committee.
Nothing really major to talk about tonight. Martha and I did meet 2 weeks ago, I think it was, right before spring break, and talked about a few like minor things and upcoming things, but nothing really major to discuss for tonight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now I'll go in finally, Facilities Committee.
Thanks, Dan. Facilities is why this is a special meeting tonight. We have 2 contracts for approval. The first one is the water line replacement, and the second one is the building envelope work, roof, and masonry. Does anyone have any questions about the bids or any of the process on that? No. Dan, I'm assuming you would run the actual vote?
Yeah, so I guess they definitely both were coming out considerably more than the initial estimates on that. I think thoughts are it's labor, it's materials, supply chain, all of the above.
Correct. They're both, if you look, sorry, I can't pass up. The water line replacement is about 20% above the estimate, and the building envelope is about 15%. It's not uncommon for smaller bids to be more variable, just because you're against a different base, so any dollar value change is exaggerated.
Well, that's good to hear, I guess, because given that we're starting to consider other projects, I guess that had me kind of worried about anything going forward in the future.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say that I think we need to sort of be prepared.
Sure.
Given like sort of how inflation's going, supply chain issues, this does not seem to be letting up soon. That is going to be something that I do see some variability in estimates going forward.
That's true. Ramesh, I mean, all estimates are basically a backwards-looking thing, which gets to your point. You can only base an estimate off what happened previously, and then a educated assessment of what the market's doing right now. But until a contractor puts numbers to paper, you really don't know. Because the contractor is the one who is looking at the work and making an assessment of what they think it will cost them to do. And so their goal is both to win the bid, but also maximize their profit. And that's why we go with low bid. Not much. I don't have anything else educated to say about that.
And I guess just in general, I know there were some issues with the contractor who actually built this edition, as I recall. And we're going to, is there any kind of lessons learned we could apply towards this last bid process, or?
We try to. The last contractor came with good recommendations, but ultimately it turned out, I believe, and I can't quite remember, I don't want to be misquoted, but that previous contractor had also done a lot of one-off projects rather than a lot of continuing work with the same client. And so at least on the building envelopes, the low bid contractor is Tandem, and they were the contractor who did the fire suppression system replacement over at Hauser last year. So we do have experience, we have direct experience with them.
I don't know if we're going to be talking about these specific bids. Perhaps, I don't know if we should make a motion to, well, I should ask Joel, is there anything else from the committee, or should we make a motion for these individual projects to discuss them further?
No, I don't have anything else other than that each bid does have a general allowance, which is it's money that is reserved in the budget for potential extra work, underground conditions, supply chain issues, something that the construction management team, Ramesh, our owner's rep, sees as a legitimate extra, so that it's contingency, but it's in the bids themselves, so we get that money back if it's not spent. So to go to your point, I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the district accept the bid for the water main replacement project from Alessio and Sons for the base bid in the amount of $214,820. And this is the water main replacement for Central.
It's the one where the line had collapsed and
correct.
That there were issues. Was it the Riverside fire was giving us variance on that until it gets completed? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, there's not much we can do. I mean, it's broken and it's old. So these kind of projects, they're not what I would consider
don't
to
do
be,
plumbing, Sherry?
they are
No.
not accessory projects. They are necessary. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So, well, is there a motion to approve? Oh boy, I just got refreshed. Here it goes. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the contract for Central Elementary water line replacement project?
So moved.
Second.
No, second.
All right. Any further discussion on this? And so this is the new contractor we haven't previously worked with, but not
DLA's letter notes where they're working currently on a couple other districts in the area. District 87 in Berkeley, and then Hinsdale South High School.
Okay. Anything else? All right, are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Okay. Ms. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Bearhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Clyber?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. Next is the approval of contracts for roof replacement and building envelope projects. And this was for, which schools was this again?
These
This
are
was Central.
for Ames, Hollywood and Blythe, and Central and Hauser. And these were originally bid as, well, we allowed individual bids on Ames, individual bid on Hollywood Blythe, and then an individual bid for Central and Hauser, and then also requested a combination bid. And ultimately, the combination bid was the most responsive. And in addition, and actually 2 contractors bid on this. This was Berglund, who did actually this work here that we're sitting in right now. And then also Tandem bid, and they had done the, as I noted, the Central Hauser sprinkler replacement project. And then there was additional negotiation with Tandem, who was still the original low bidder, but they reduced their bid a little bit more to get closer to Berglund's low bid on the Ames work when it was considered only by itself. And so that bid is for $1,435,000.
Okay. Is there a motion that the board approve contracts for roof replacement and building envelope projects as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is any further discussion on this?
Just to clarify, because you did just break it down that way, Tandem is doing the whole
All
thing.
of them,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
All right. Any other questions? Are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Clyber?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, looks like there were facility advisory committee meetings.
There were 2 meetings, although I do believe we discussed some of the March 3rd meeting previously, but to summarize, rather than going through each agenda, we've been focusing on summer maintenance, which includes what we just bid on, what we just approved. Also, we are continuing to be attentive to various maintenance and efficiency issues, which you'll notice in the second agenda, it talks about windows and locker rooms and making sure that we're in a state of good repair. There are some things that are not so much old, but looking more tired and in need of updating and repair. So the architect is going to take a walk through at the locker rooms at Hauser. And there's some thought on some windows, but we're paying attention to those. There's nothing directly wrong with them right now. Just we know that those will eventually be on the horizon. At Blythe, we will be moving, or DLA is moving forward with the renovation concept, which was both met the needs that had been defined by the smaller building group, and also we went through it and looked at the various alternatives. We saw that presentation last time. Central and Hauser, that will be coming to us not necessarily on April 20th, because the traffic consultant is going to be doing some additional traffic analysis, and originally the work was overlapping with spring break, which doesn't work very well when you look at kids arriving at the school. We will be continuing to discuss and make recommendations with regards to a play surface. The current options look like full artificial turf, turf with organic fill, and then the natural, and continuing to look at the pluses and minuses of those with a focus on pretty continuous use of the surface. We've also discussed the auditorium at Hauser, which there were 3 cost estimates and, well, sorry, evaluation by DLA, and then 3 cost estimates for, I was going to use the word improvements, and that's not quite right. Bringing up to current standards, a lot of electrical work. It was good, better, best, all of which better would build on good, best builds on better. All of those are above $1 million, which is disappointing, but probably realistic, considering the level of effort that they think they need to do, which includes just the general lighting in the ceiling, plus all of the performance equipment, so audio and lighting for the stage itself. And
Do they need to do any rewiring for that?
that's part
Like
of why.
yeah,
It's
okay.
breakers.
It's more electricity.
It's electricity. The hard part is that a lot of the work is behind the scenes, so it's not something that you see when you walk in. You don't see new wires.
Right.
You might see a fixture that's slightly brighter.
But you need to be able to hold the current so it doesn't burn the building.
Exactly. Plus, because we would be doing work in the space, there need to be some ADA improvements as well, making some additional space for, say, a wheelchair in the front row with.
Really? Even though you're just working with the electrical, we still have to deal with some of the other structural stuff? Or maybe not structural, but like other...
It comes, and I can't speak, I'm speaking from memory rather than having read it recently, but it comes down to the amount you're spending and the level of work that's being done in the room. And the big issue is once you touch something, you're in for the whole thing.
Yeah, okay.
It's always hard for me to accept that, but that's essentially, that's how the rules are written.
Yeah, that's one way you get stuff done, right?
So,
Set requirements.
now the architectural improvements are not the majority of what it is, but those would be done along the way.
Do we know how old that the electrical wiring is in that area?
It's not so much the wires, it's the equipment that they serve, it's the breaker boxes, it's the controls, it's the switches. Things over time, over a lot of use, tend to either stop working well or they just fail and then they get replaced, and a lot of the equipment in that space is old and not easily replaceable. That's the biggest issue. It's getting harder and harder to replace as time goes by.
Are you talking $1 million just for those audio and electrical things and not for a rehaul of the main?
Correct, yes.
The main room?
It's electrical, just imagine it's a lot of labor.
Yeah,
it's a
I
lot
believe
of
it.
people touching.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like the more
Seems-
we've looked at the project, the more complicated that one also becomes. I know.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see the details on that one.
And then also to bring the controls to a spot where you're controlling from a place where the operator can see the stage rather
Yeah,
than
I get
being
it.
behind the wall.
No, I know,
So
it's
that
paper,
was-
it's not cheap. But
When does our grant expire?
That's good, sorry. It expires, Jim, the grant for the Hauser work has to be committed by end of June, so we will be, thank you, this was a good segue. DLA will be providing a new memorandum of understanding to do some of the more detailed work, which will get us towards committing those funds.
Was that
And that's a
50,000?
Is that a hard deadline? There's no extension on that or anything?
It has to be committed by the end of June and spent, paid out by the end of September.
Was that $50,000? Is that the amount?
Yeah.
Jim, can you remind us the amount?
Sorry?
Was
Can
it
you
50?
remind the amount of the grant?
We get 50,000 from the state, so.
Yeah.
And it's in our account. So if we spend 100, then that's good. But they're gonna match down an hour up to 50.
They're gonna match up to 50.
So some of the work that we've already done in this initial analysis does count towards that, but we did not spend 100,000 on
Not quite a huge
analysis.
dent though, is it?
So it's a match. It's not just $50,000. We have to spend 50 to get 50.
To get 50.
I was thinking it was just.
We already had the 50, they
Yeah.
sent it to the fire department.
But if you only spent 25, they're gonna ask for 25 back.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like we're gonna have that problem. Is that a reasonable timeline for us to be diligent in this?
We thought so. We discussed it with Ramesh, and some of it is, one, there's the engineering and architectural work, but then also we could commit to buying, if the design is well enough advanced, to buy equipment in advance and store it until it can be installed.
Okay.
So the goal would not be to have something sitting out there for months or years. We're buying it knowing that it's going to be installed.
No, that's a good point though, because it won't take very much to spend $50,000 on electrical equipment. If we can put it somewhere else, we don't necessarily have to spend the full $1 million to do the project. We just need to spend the $50,000 on something before. Okay.
Or 100 total, I guess.
Or yeah.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. Well, 50 of our own money, and then, but 100 total.
Yes.
Yeah. But we just need to spend the money. We don't need to complete the project. And I was associating those two things as the same, but yeah, okay.
I don't know, sometimes the grant money, it seems like when they give you a coupon, but what are you really doing with the coupon?
Yeah, right.
And what does the coupon make you buy? Something to think about, yeah.
And then David was also part of those meetings. Should mention that as well. Other questions?
Not on that.
So I understand we're getting something free.
That's a first.
Nothing's free in life, Dan. Everything has conditions.
There are conditions on the tree?
Remind your kids that.
Oh, there, you're moving it, yes.
The tree, yeah.
Oh, the
Trees.
tree.
He's right.
The trees.
Oh, well, before we move on, I thought you were going to talk about the long-range considerations.
Well, we don't have to move to that, you're right.
The long-range consideration, the Hauser PE and locker room I already mentioned. The central library expansion was more of a making sure and paying attention to the needs of our building, if any extra space is required. Martha and I had a brief discussion about this, but we are not talking about massive increases in enrollments. So the central library is kind of buried behind a corner and down some stairs. So sometimes it appears to be a little bit less usable than we would like. But that is
And unfortunately, any renovation to the central library would be a pretty significant ADA change. The library, you step down 6-8 stairs to get into the library. It's a nice size room. It's actually a nice library. It's just that we talked about, could we create any small group learning spaces off the library? Like, for example, at the Ames Library, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And it just is another one where there's not something simple to be gained there.
The stairs and just make
Or like
it
carve out a
right.
little corner. It just doesn't.
Oh, is
No,
it
the
steep?
hallways
Okay.
are
It's
unusual too.
steep,
Okay.
it's a little bit narrow.
Got it, okay.
It gets.
It relates to the hallway. I mean, it just, yeah.
Is there a stair in the other, I'm trying to think of the other exit out, there's another.
There's a back set of stairs.
There's a back, I'm trying to remember if it's all stairs.
It's all
Then you go
stairs.
down and then you
Probably
go out on
Yeah.
level, I think.
Because doesn't it go down to the teacher's lounge?
Not, you have
Or
to
am
go
I
down
thinking
some
of the
other,
wrong
you go into the hallway. One of the things we had talked about was there a way to expand the library into the hallway and there's two, I'll call them small group learning spaces. They're really server rooms right down, I think, off the central library. There's space there that's poorly utilized, but I think to make it better utilized is perhaps overly complicated.
Yeah.
That's my word for
Old
tonight.
building problems. Yeah. Okay. Can you remind me that
Change standards problems is probably a better way to
change?
describe
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, but that's old building problems.
it. It is, but sometimes it's not the age so much as values and the ways things are done is moved.
Yeah. Can you remind me what is our timeline? I know we just had the turf, I guess mainly turf discussion a couple months ago. What is the timeline of that?
That is at earliest 2023.
Okay,
So
we're thinking
that's
that and
why.
Blythe together, because I feel like I'm pretty confident knowing like Blythe, we're really planning on 23, and I couldn't remember what our exact timeline was for Central. So we're thinking about those two together the same summer.
Potentially, and Central Hauser, I mean, there's some conversation it could even get pushed to 24. I mean, just coming to the agreements and the decisions. I mean, I know we're still very much at kind of initial phases here. The DLA is, Joel just mentioned, they're not going to come to the April 20th board meeting. They're going to come to the May 4th. I think the 4th is their date, right?
That sounds right.
POW for a presentation, and again, to get full board feedback, then take it back to Facility Advisory Committee. So they'll come with sort of a updated draft with more analysis around traffic. We've asked like what considerations can be done just in the parking lot. There's certainly the turf with organic fill, the not turf.
Community
consideration.
buy-in, and also someone who's probably not going to be happy in the end, and that's as Principal Hefner mentioned, somebody's just not going to be happy.
Nobody's ever
so
happy,
we'll have to accept that as well.
or somebody's always unhappy. I guess I said that wrong. Some people are happy.
Some people are happy.
I took the
some
dog.
are
I took the
not.
dog for a walk, and I was just looking at all the swamps around, and it just kind of resonated with me. So, water all over the place this week with the constant rain.
And that's normal after rain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's something that people sometimes forget is deal with it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that might be a little too harsh, but.
All right, let's move to the tree. No offense.
Sherry wants to talk about the tree.
I want to talk about the tree.
Yes. Now we get to the free thing.
So we have been chosen for a tree. by the
Trees,
Morton
I think,
Arboretum.
right, Jim?
Trees. Yeah.
Nice.
trees.
Wow.
What's it? Yeah. What?
the email says
6 or 7?
That's great.
In the park also.
Okay.
Sorry, Jim, the reason I said a tree is your letter, your memo
memo.
says a tree.
A tree,
So
right.
that should really be many trees.
Many trees. Or a tree, yeah.
And the
That's great.
Arboretum notes that they're, they'll propagate.
I think that's great.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, was it just the relationship with our village forester? That's what it kind of sounded like, but was there anything else that kind of, I mean, I think we're officially an arboretum as of like 2 years ago or something, we got arboretum
Yes,
status?
Mike,
Yes.
the village forester, has a very good relationship with the
But the
Arboretum. And then Lisa
who works at the
was
Morton Arboretum, her
She
kids
was
all
a
over the place.
former
She-
board member.
she's
Oh,
as
it
well.
did, it did say that in there,
Yeah.
didn't it? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
She was a very active volunteer in our school community for
Okay.
many, many, many years.
It's good to know people.
So I assume no objections to additional trees.
As long as Blythe wants them. I mean,
You said don't fill the amphitheater. Like
yeah, I was gonna say, as long as the place is
Yeah.
appropriate, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Oh, as the best time to plant a tree was 35 years ago. The next best time is now. So.
So philosophical. All right.
That's it.
All right. Is there any further public comment?
There is none.
Okay. And at this time, future meeting dates, April 20th, 2022, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. Board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. if necessary, and return to open session at 7 p.m. May 4th, 2022, Committee of the Whole meeting, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Blythe Park Elementary School. May 18th, 2022, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. Board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. if necessary, and return to open session at 7 p.m. All right, and if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.